In the summer of 1921, a 14-year-old boy named Philo Farnsworth was guiding a horse through a dry Idaho potato field, the turned earth stretching flat to the horizon under a wide open sky. He looked down at the straight furrows and had a very specific idea about television. He sketched it in his school notebook and showed it to his chemistry teacher, Justin Tolman. Tolman kept the drawing. No particular reason. He just did. Years later, that sketch would be the most important piece of paper in an American courtroom. Philo Farnsworth's earliest years unfolded on the raw edge of the American frontier. Born in a log cabin near Beaver, Utah, in 1906, he spent his childhood moving with his family, first across the dry plateaus of Utah, then north to a small ranch outside Rigby, Idaho. There, the days began before sunrise and ended with candlelight. Nights in the farmhouse were long and quiet. Young Philo filled them by reading anything he could find. Old copies of Popular Science, Electrical World, and hand-me-down textbooks, their pages smudged with soot and grease. He studied by the flicker of a tallow candle, tracing diagrams of motors and batteries, memorizing the invisible paths of electrons. Even as a boy, he was restless with questions. He scrounged for broken radios and spare wire, building crude generators from junkyard parts. He experimented with a Delco power system, trying to coax a few extra volts out of a hand-cranked dynamo. The farm's isolation only sharpened his curiosity. Electricity was a rumor in Rigby, but in Farnsworth's mind, it was already a living force, something that could be shaped and guided, if only he could understand its rules. Picture, like a field, could be broken into lines, scanned back and forth, row by row, then pieced together again. The idea struck with such clarity. In 1922, as a ninth grader at Rigby High School, he drew the design in his science notebook and brought it to his chemistry teacher, Justin Tolman. The drawing showed a camera tube, a photosensitive plate, an electron beam, a way to sweep that beam across an image line by line. Tolman looked at the sketch, recognized its strangeness, and tucked it away. He signed and dated the page, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of quiet respect for the boy's imagination. That piece of paper would travel farther than either of them could have guessed, carrying the proof of a moment when a farm boy, standing in a field, glimpsed the future of television. By 1926, Philo Farnsworth was no longer just a farm boy with a sketch in a high school notebook. He and Elma, known to everyone as Pem, had married and moved to San Francisco, chasing the distant promise of their shared dream. The couple rented a cramped second-floor space at 202 Green Street, a place that rattled with the clang of streetcars and the hum of possibility. The laboratory was spare, with battered tables, a workbench crowded with glass tubes, and the faint smell of ozone from high-voltage experiments. But it was here, with Pem recording every step and drafting diagrams by his side, that Farnsworth tried to turn his teenage vision into a working machine. The first prototypes took shape in the most unglamorous way, in a shed behind the family's Idaho home, using salvaged radio parts and glassware from local shops. These early attempts were stubborn, demanding blinding arc lamps just to register the faintest signal. Each night, Farnsworth would file away another page of notes, adjusting voltages, recoding the photosensitive plates, searching for the elusive sweep of electrons that would bring a picture to life. Investors. George Everson and Leslie Gurrell arrived with $6,000, enough to keep the lights on and the experiments running. They watched as Farnsworth and Pem worked late into the night, Pem's careful hands steadying the glass tubes, her quiet encouragement never far away. The team's patience wore thin, but Farnsworth's determination did not. He filed his first patent for the image dissector in early 1927, describing a device that could scan an image, line by line, with no moving parts, only electrons, light, and a relentless belief in the idea. On September 7, 1927, the lab at 202 Green Street filled with a hush as Farnsworth prepared the demonstration. A single straight line flickered onto the receiver's screen. the world's first fully electronic television image. Everson broke the silence, asking, "When are we going to see some dollars from this thing?" Farnsworth simply pointed to the glowing line and replied, "There you are." In that moment, a farm boy's chalkboard dream became something real enough to draw the gaze of the world and the attention of powerful corporate giants waiting in the wings. In the spring of 1930, the modest laboratory at 202 Green Street became the unlikely crossroads of two worlds. Philo Farnsworth, still in his 20s, stood surrounded by battered tables and glass tubes, the air tinged with ozone and hope. Into this cramped space stepped Vladimir Zworykin, the Russian-born engineer from RCA. He arrived with polite curiosity, but behind every question lay the weight of a corporate empire. For 3 days, Zworykin watched every demonstration, peered into the workings of the image dissector, and pressed Farnsworth for details. Farnsworth, open and earnest, explained his methods without suspicion. He never guessed that each answer would be relayed back to David Sarnoff, the man determined to make RCA the gatekeeper of American television. Sarnoff had already built NBC into a broadcasting giant and saw television as his next conquest. He believed that the future belonged to those who controlled the patents, not just the ideas. Soon after Zworykin's visit, RCA made its move. A formal offer arrived, $100,000 for Farnsworth's entire portfolio of patents, on the condition that he join RCA and abandon his independent work. But the offer came with a price Farnsworth could not accept. He wanted television to be more than a commercial product. He saw it as a tool for education, for connecting distant lives, for something bigger than any boardroom. Accepting RCA's terms meant surrendering his vision to a corporation that might bury it or twist it for profit. He refused. The decision drew a sharp line between the lone inventor and the corporate machine. RCA, rebuffed, turned to the courts, setting in motion a legal battle that would stretch for years and drain Farnsworth's resources. The stakes had shifted. It was no longer just about building a better television. It was about who would shape what television meant and who would reap its rewards. In this moment, the story of invention became a story of power, integrity, and the cost of holding to a dream. Justin Tolman stepped into the witness box, holding a battered notebook from a classroom in Idaho. He opened it to a sketch dated 1922, drawn by a teenage Philo Farnsworth. The lines mapped out a new way to capture images, a vision that would become the foundation of electronic television. Tolman described the moment Farnsworth first explained the idea, recalling the excitement in the boy's voice as he spoke of scanning pictures with electrons and light. The court pored over the notebook, tracing its journey from a farm town to the center of a national battle. In July 1935, the United States Patent Office issued its decision. The ruling, 48 pages long, awarded priority to Farnsworth. The invention of electronic television belonged to the farm boy, not to RCA's Vladimir Zworykin. RCA, forced to pay royalties, faced a rare defeat. For a brief time, it looked like the underdog had won. The victory faded quickly. RCA's lawyers appealed and delayed payments. Each year in court drained the value of Farnsworth's patents. By the time television sets became common after World War II, most of his key claims had expired. The royalties that finally arrived were small, never matching the scale of his achievement. The money covered debts, but could not restore lost years or ease the strain on his health. Through it all, Pem stood by him, recording experiments, balancing the books, and holding the family together as hope gave way to disappointment. Farnsworth watched his invention turn into a tool for advertising and spectacle, far from the promise he had imagined. He refused to keep a television at home, telling Pem it had gone the wrong way. Yet he kept searching for new answers. In 1964, he patented the Fusor, a device that briefly caught the world's attention as a possible path to nuclear fusion. On July 20th, 1969, Philo and Pem watched Neil Armstrong step onto the moon. Farnsworth whispered, "Pem, this has made it all worthwhile." For a moment, the dream felt complete. A single line, just a blur on glass, once proved a farm boy's dream could conquer empire. Yet, as screens multiply and creators fight for credit, Philo Farnsworth's name still flickers at the edge of memory. In a world shaped by unseen visionaries, legacy is as fragile as light. Subscribe for more untold histories.